Welcome. I'm Alex, the founder of Glass. Welcome to Glasse Factory's new podcast. Joining me for these sessions, I have my good friends Helena and Josh with me. If you don't know me yet, I work in management, marketing, PR, and media in the music industry with a focus primarily on dance music.
Hi, I'm Helena. I started out in music as a photographer and a journalist, and I've expanded out into management and PR. And I have a focus in rock and metal, but I listen to just about everything.
She says rock and metal, but she was at EDC with me this year. So I think she's starting to change.
And saying that she loves Sarah Landry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What's up, guys? I'm Josh. I've been involved in music since I was literally 12 years old. I came from the metal scene, helped build the metalcore scene out here in St. Louis. Now I'm working my way into the dance music community as a photographer and a DJ with the help of these two here with me. So excited to be here and ready to see what we're talking about today, Alex.
That was so nice, Josh. Yeah, also for context, I'm based in Nashville and Helena is based in Sacramento. So we're all throughout the country here. And I'm really excited for us to discuss like all the different things that happen, how they connect us, and trends we notice and things like that. Yeah. To kick it off, let's start with how we spent our New Year's Eve. I know that I have something to say about my New Year's Eve. Helena, I actually don't know how you spent your New Year's Eve, so I'd love to hear about it before I go into mine, because I know Josh has a lot to say, so I want him to have the
spotlight. Yeah, so I spent last year, I went absolutely crazy last year. I photographed the Dresden Dolls as their photographer. And that was a super duper amazing experience. And I covered events throughout that weekend, or that, I don't remember if it was on a weekend or not, but I decided this year that I really wanted to spend some time at home just to recap and refresh. I didn't do that really last year. And I don't know, it just felt really nice to be able to have that reset and that refresh and just to be ready for 2025. I don't know about you guys. So I didn't really do that much. I just stayed inside.
Yeah, I was like kind of feeling on the same page as you, but then I ended up working at Night We Met that night, and it was honestly perfect because Night We Met is in Nashville and it's like the only dance club here. So they had Sophia Cortese's performing, and she's about to go on tour with Rufus Du Sol next year. She's from Peru and based out of Berlin. And she has a really unique sound, but her set too was just really, really diverse, which I think was special because she has this very niche vibe, and she got to definitely like play around that night because the Nashville dance scene is still developing. So you don't really have to like cater to a certain expectation yet in terms of like your set, you know? Like she was having some UK garage moments in there, which is, I was like, okay. And it was a lot of fun. The Night We Met team did a really good job like organizing everything. I didn't feel like overwhelmed at any point in the night, and usually New Year's can just be like really overwhelming depending on how, like where you are. But I had a really good New Year's. What about you, Josh? How was New Year's at the Sphere?
Yeah, I did not stay home. It's funny because going into it, especially as you guys aren't aware, but I just started DJing this year, taking a lot of gigs, but I realized the amount of effort and energy that takes out of you. So honestly, going into this trip probably 4 weeks before, Katie and I were close to canceling because I was so tired. We were just like, oh my gosh. But one of my good friends who helped put it together had got like a party bus and stuff ordered. So like, you know what? Let's just do one more. It's all good. Mm-hmm. Not a big deal. We're good for it. So we did it. So yes, as Alex was saying, I spent my New Year's at the Sphere with Anima and everybody else who was there. Absolutely mental experience. I'll describe it more here in a bit. But yeah, the Sphere is one of those things that just like you go into expecting the world and then you get the universe. It was such a cool experience. Did that, stayed at my buddy's, and then took a 10 a.m. flight home so I could play my own New Year's set at a club in St. Louis that night. So needless to say, I wasn't recovered till that following, whatever 2 days later was, because my days were all jumbled up. But yeah, Alex, if you would like me to talk about the Sphere of it, I would love to.
Yeah, it looked so crazy. I'd definitely love to hear from you about like what impressed you the most. And then maybe we can all like look at the night by night lineups and say if we got to pick which night to go, which one would have been like, okay, that's oversending.
Okay.
Because didn't you get your tickets before support was announced?
Yeah, so that was kind of like, I don't want to call it a bummer, but that's just how things work these days where, you buy the tickets and, it's FOMO marketing and all that. And, we got our tickets for the 30th pretty early. We were pumped. And then, they released the lineups, which I guess we'll get to that later. And I was like, oh, gosh, ours was good. But like there was a few others that I obviously would have gone to instead.
Yeah.
But no, what the most takeaways, I mean, gosh, where to start? Just walking into it, you're transported into another place. Like, truthfully, like the whole building was turned blue. I don't know if it's like that all the time, but it was even like the artwork and stuff was all dance music and anima based. So they had, Ava Zero, who's one of his robot figures that he puts on the visuals. They had her throughout the building. They had some of his older stuff, references to his old catalog on posters throughout the building as well. And then just walking into the sphere for the first time, I don't want to say it was on the same level, but it reminded me of what I felt when I walked into EDC for the first time, where it's like, yes, I have these high expectations, and I walk in and there's just this giant dome with like blue and green colors on it, larger than life. I mean, it was just so cool. And then from there, I mean, they nailed everything. I can't even tell you the last time I've been blown away that much by a music event. And again, this was something to whereas by the lineup that I was given, I wasn't necessarily thinking it was going to be the best thing ever, but it absolutely was. It was by far the best show I've been to that year. The strongest performance from Anima I've seen, period, maybe outside of his Coachella set, or not Coachella, Tomorrowland set. But I mean, thinking about everything that went into this and then how well the team pulled it off, I saw a clip that got me pumped on the show that we ended up going to. One of the openers, Rampa, he's pretty big in the dance community right now on the Afro House side of things. He actually helped build some of the technology that went into the show. So now, the music nerd in me, like knowing that, it's like, okay, well, now I'm happy I was at that show. And then just thinking about what Matteo Anima, obviously himself, put together for this show. I mean, it literally was a cybernetic opera. It was 4 acts, and there was a brief, 30-second intermission in between each act. And I got to say, if you're one of those people who enjoy film, enjoy a good journey, enjoy a good story, I don't know if he's going to bring it back down the line, but you got to go check it out because it's so cool the way he starts with Act 1, and it'll start with one of his iconic tracks, Consciousness, which was literally how I discovered him. And then we get all the way through each act, and there's a reference to like that time in his career. And then now it's like what he can do with it. I mean, the sky's the limit. And I don't want to take up all the time. So if you guys have questions or anything, please feel free to jump in or help. But yeah, I could go for days about this. I loved it.
You just got me like chills. That's where I went like, ooh, I like couldn't, like I physically felt it. Like you set the story so well, like walking in and then seeing all these things like relics of his career, which I feel like is becoming more and more common because like John Summit did a similar thing for the Kia Forum where they had like Miami, how we feeling, baby? You know what I mean? And like all these other things from his career, like along the walls, which I wasn't there, but everybody on social media was posting them and was like really excited about that. And then also too, like with Anima, I think it's so funny how he named his robots. That's such a niche fan lore moment for you to be like, Ava 1000. Like, I was like, whoa, okay, so there's some lore going on with this guy. Like I think his brand is just so interesting because I actually haven't seen him yet because at first I was like, okay, it's cool. There's like a guy banging on the screen and like the beats are very melodic techno, which I do really like, but also I've just heard from some harsh critics that like afterlife shows are really fire, but the dance floor is not alive. Sure. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. So how I feel is like, okay, if I do see Anima, I'd probably prefer an opportunity like the Sphere where there's kind of like these different mezzanines. So it's like, okay, I can have my dancing moment, but if I am having like just a very introspective and like absorbing moment, then you could like sit down and like be like, whoa, for a moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it might not be a show I want to just stand and look at something through if that's the vibe. However, I haven't been yet, so I'm just speaking off based what I've heard. even though with that being said, everybody still says you have to go see it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that a lot of people were saying that like his set was like pre-recorded, whatever, because of how like theatric he was with the machines, which was what led to them posting the videos with Rampa.
Yeah.
That's how you say it, right? Rampa, not Rampa.
Either way.
Rampa.
It's
Okay,
fine.
Rampa. I'll say Rampa because Rampa sounds weird. Rampa. Rampa, like fixing, or I mean, not fixing, but making the technology with him.
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool to see. I think that it was definitely just such a big deal. And like everybody's been talking about this since like summer, right? Like when did it even
Yep.
get announced? Like close to a year ago now, right?
I mean, yeah, at least 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, at least, because this has been like what everybody's been talking about. So I'm actually pretty jealous that you were able to like do that. This year I was just like you said, like I've been so burned out from the past
Right.
year because it's just been like nonstop. So this winter I was like, okay, I definitely need to like carve out some space in my life to, if I am going to be working, then minimize how far the travel is just so I actually get like a little bit of a break. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Um
Totally.
that being said, though, what was your favorite part of the show throughout it? Because you touched on so many things just with that little
Dude,
intro.
yeah, I mean, honestly, so it's so funny because part of my EDC Las Vegas Ray family was there with me. And a few of them had seen the show the night before. And you guys know this. I was posting everywhere. Please don't send me anything. Please keep it hush. I want this to hit me the way it's supposed to hit going into it blind, you know? My favorite dance track of all time is Consciousness, the Eric Prydz remix. So him opening with an homage to that was just insane. So if I were to be given probably 3 more months of time to come down from it, that probably would be my favorite moment. There's another track he has called Tim Sara, one of his more iconic visuals as well. And that's my favorite track of his. But we didn't hear it that night. But what we got instead was the live performer who does that track debuting a new ID with him. So that was a really peak moment too. And then you gotta love Siren. I'm sure you guys know her.
Oh yeah,
The
I've heard
purple,
Siren.
yeah, the dancer, ooh, cool thing. The minute he started bringing that in, I mean, everyone was off their feet. I was off my feet pretty much the whole show. But I mean, that moment alone got everyone just warped into it. Like I said, we were outside of planet Earth for a good 2 hours.
That's so fun.
We were in our own little dome. You couldn't tell us nothing. Like, it was so cool. So those were probably my top takeaways as far as like the sound goes. If I'm thinking about what impressed me the most, and this is kind of something that I think a lot of people who go to shows struggle with, but what impressed me the most was, as long as you brought whatever vibe you wanted to, there was a way to find it. So we were in section 304, which in my opinion is a great spot to go if you can only do, let's just say they do this show again down the line. If you can only do it once, do section 300. Doesn't necessarily matter where, but it's the perfect spot to get awesome videos, and you're still not too high enough to where you can't dance. So I remember we got in there, and my buddy who I've been meeting for the first time, we call him Nike. He was like, hey, like, I know you're going to dance. Like, what should we say? And there was a group of girls behind us. So we turned around. We were like, hey, I know I'm tall. How do you guys feel? And instantly they're like, no, do your thing. We're going to do the same thing since you're doing it. So then our whole row was just a full family for those 2 hours, you know? So it still had quote unquote rave and festival vibes. So that's why I'm sure if you guys saw my story after it, it's like, if they really do hone this down, expand this, bring in people who are as gifted as he is, they can make this an experience. And I'm not kidding. I would pay the same I'd pay for Ultra. So over 500s to go experience that, even if it was just a day. It was that cool.
What you're saying right there about how you still felt like you were in a rave, even though you were in like a really, really proper venue, because you know, like the history of rave is like the absolute opposite.
Right.
Close to no venue. That just reminded me of how I felt after seeing Charlie XCX at Bridgestone here, because she did her stadium tour with Troye Sivan. But I swear to God, when she was performing, like nobody was sitting in their seats. Like everybody was dressed in these like grungy UK rave outfits. Like I was like, what is happening right now? Because it's Nashville, you have to remember. Like when you walked through Broadway after getting dropped off, because now you can't like get dropped off that close to the venue unless you like wait a really long time. And I was like, no, I'll just walk. If you like when you were walking down Broadway, like everybody was wearing green. Like if I were like having too many drinks or something, I'd be like, is it St. Patrick's Day even though it's October? Like what is going on? If I didn't like know she was in town, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I definitely can relate to that feeling, and I'm so happy that that was something that you experienced too, because I feel like there definitely was some conversation about like if that standard of like rave vibe will be brought into the venue, because it's typically like a band, like bands and John Mayer performing there right now. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, totally.
It looked like a crazy weekend, and it definitely seemed like it was like the place to be this New Year's Eve, because everybody was posting about like, I need to find tickets last minute, or saying like how far in advance. Everybody was like bragging like how far in advance they like booked their travel. Like, you know what I mean? Like just everybody was talking about this. So that being said, let's pick a night from the lineup that if you got to choose, knowing ahead of time which night you would go to. The residency went for, did it go for 6 nights through New Year's? It did. I thought it went for 5. Oh my God.
And then he'll be back there this weekend. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God. That is so crazy. Yeah. So through New Year's weekend on December 27th, they had Dixon and Mike Dean, which that's just like legendary. Dixon was actually the first DJ I ever saw play at Red Rocks, because the first time I was at Red Rocks, Dixon was opening for Zoo. He was good. Then December 28th, they had Emily Lenz, Chris Avant-Garde back-to-back Rebuke.
Yep.
And then on December 29th, they had Charlotte DeWitt, Cassian back-to-back Kevin DeVries.
What?
And then on the 30th, they had Rampa and Parisi. And then on December 31st, they had Adriatique and Masano. And then on January 1st, they had Tiesto and RG, which I think it's crazy that Tiesto is doing direct support for Anima, because like, okay, Anima is like, he's up there, but I've never in my lifetime seen Tiesto open for someone. I just haven't seen that. He's always the headliner. So for Anima to be on the top, I think is just insane.
And I think the main reason with that was because, I mean, you got to think he has a curated show. I would even say like there's a few others who probably would have been over him. Now after this, I think I wouldn't be shocked if he's over him again in the future. But if Tiesto had a show ready and he wanted to do that 2-hour headlining slot, he could have easily and probably should have had that. But
well, he did do some kind of headliner, because then Anima came and did a back-to-back with him at that headline show that weekend. So
yeah, he went to I think he was at Live that weekend.
Yeah, I think they were just like scratching each other's backs or something. Maybe Tiesto really wanted to have this Sphere moment for New Year's, being like part of the inaugural DJ class into the Sphere, which like fits and is like perfect for him. He definitely deserves it.
Yeah.
But I still, when I saw that, I was like, this is nuts. And the Afterlife movement, and just like how many people attend these events, that kind of like really put it into perspective for me. Like I already knew, but that I was like, okay, this is more than just some really big parties in Tulum. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's fair though. And that's why I say after this, it's different. You know what I mean? But he had to get through this iconic run in these moments to now where it's like, okay, everyone else, their interest was there, your ear was to it, but now I guarantee you won't miss the next one. You know what I mean?
So then I'm going to read the last two that are this weekend, just because like I feel they deserve their respect in this consideration that we're having. So on Friday, tomorrow, they will have Sebastian Ingrosso and Script opening. And then on January 11th, they'll have Camel Fat and Leighton Giordani. For me personally, I would probably My first pick would probably be December 29th with Charlotte DeWitt, Cassian, and Kevin DeVries. My second pick would probably be January 11th with Camel Fat and Leighton Giordani.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. Leighton's killing it right now. I would choose A Night with Charlotte. Duh. She's one of the people who got me into true techno. I respect her for it. So let's just get that one out of the way. But I think if I didn't do that one, man, something about seeing a piece of Swedish House Mafia in the Sphere just feels right. Like seeing Sebastian in the Sphere would be so cool. And I know you're going to hear, if not the original versions of those iconic tracks, you're going to hear some type of modern house remix of that, similar to the Ultra set from a few years ago. So I think that'd be sweet. That would be really cool.
I can't argue that one because also just Swedish House Mafia, it's hard to go wrong with their sets.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Then I do also want to note that I think it's iconic that they did get a date with Mike Dean.
Oh yeah, that's nuts.
That's just heads are out when Mike's out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's funny too because like obviously if you don't necessarily follow other stuff outside of dance, you might not necessarily know the name, but that dude's produced for everybody.
Yeah, no, for real. Like I'm familiar with his name because of hip hop.
Right.
Like when I was like really, really deep in the hip hop scene, I think like 8 years ago now. No, I don't know. It's been a while. You know what I mean? And so when I started to see him like popping up on these like EDM collabs, I was like, what is going on here? And then I kind of looked into him more. It was like, he's just a creative producer. It seems like he just like likes to be part of cool productions, which I think is dope.
Yep. Totally.
Definitely a very behind the scenes guy, but I love seeing him have his moments in the spotlight. You know, I think it's pretty cool.
So basically, long story short, if his name shows up, you're going to be wanting to see it. Right.
I would definitely be interested at the minimum. Like I can't remember I didn't get to see him because he was opening for The Weeknd on tour, and I ran into the craziest traffic of my life going to that show. It took me 8 hours to get from Nashville to Atlanta because of Chattanooga traffic, and it was actually like one of the worst drives of my life. And I think I missed seeing him because of that, which I was really mad about. If I had gotten to see all of these lineups with getting to pick one night to go, I would probably pick December 29th with Josh because Charlotte, she just does not miss. Like I've listened to more sets of hers than I've gotten to see. I got to see her for the first time this summer with Josh, which was very special. Do you have anything else you want to share about the Anima New Year's Eve?
I do, because I left one thing out that was really cool that actually I thought was pretty cheese going into it. The AI cello concept was awesome. So yes, like cello as in the instrument. And it was really dope. So his setup, he had the board in the middle on a high riser that he was using. And then on the outside of that, he had two giant cellos with these giant robotic arms, and he was using artificial intelligence to have those play melodies with the songs when he wanted those to come in. Like I said, going into it, I was just like, I mean, whatever, I'm here for you anyways, do what you want. But it ended up being another thing where it was like, what a cool concept. And it did really take those songs and add another element. The good thing, like, or maybe not the good thing. One of the things from melodic techno that's the biggest takeaway with it, and this is where I think it kind of takes a while to click for some people, it's very melodic and very epic. You can almost, I'm willing to bet in a few years you're going to start hearing these sounds in theater films. That's how massive they are. So the room acoustics were great, but then having that orchestral element through those cellos was top notch. And the way he did it, which only he can do, of course, he's not just going to have people come do it. He's going to have some AI robots do it as well. So I thought that was cool, but then it did kind of give me a talking point with some of my buddies. And I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts as well. The place for AI in music, I thought that was an interesting way to do it. Have it be live, but then I was talking with one of my friends because he's pretty in the know on that side of stuff. He's like, well, what if you flew out two of these other people and had them do that? I told him in that context, in the terms of this show, I think it was fine because his whole thing is cybernetic, future punk, all that, whatever you want to call it, with the robots and all that. but I can see we're seeing more and more how AI is starting to creep into the music world. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Was that a cool concept? Do you think that's overwhelming or?
I think that with his vibe, it's so fitting. And that actually kind of like reminds me of, I don't know, since that whole thing happened, I've definitely seen like DJs and attendees and anybody in between kind of being like, his dad's a billionaire. Of course he can do this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? First off, like who your dad is, like doesn't really determine if people are going to buy tickets or not for your show. You have to be able to draw a crowd. If you're just like a rich kid, that's not going to do it. What he's doing though, with like those types of elements, I don't think the average musician could afford to do. And he's doing it really well and really tastefully and really like part of this experience. So I've always kind of felt like, okay, I understand the argument that like people work so hard for certain opportunities, but then like somebody with more resources and faster training or whatever it might be like comes along, but that's kind of just like life, you know? And if somebody does have those opportunities and they want to contribute to society through making very futuristic and like boundary pushing, like it doesn't even have to be futuristic, but just boundary pushing art, and like also provide a product, being the music, the ticket, whatever, that enhances people's lives, why is that a bad thing? Like, thank you for deciding to dedicate your life to that, in my opinion. So I think that it's interesting because I see what he's doing. I really like the AI cello component. I think it also kind of like exposes people to AI in a situation that doesn't make them just freak out. However, at the same time, I could see cello players freak out and be like, what does this mean for my job? You know what I mean? But I also don't think that, well, maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't think that like an AI could probably like play a cello more originally than a human.
I
Do you
have
know what I
a
mean?
take on that actually. I've been asking some artists in interviews that I've been having like what their take is on AI and music. And Nothing More, for example, had a really interesting perspective. And they said that it could be interesting as a tool, kind of like how Anima is doing, but there's still that lacking of that collaboration that happens in music with humans. And there's not really that yet, at least, and that's why they're not concerned about it and they're okay with using it as a tool. So maybe it could have to do with something like that.
Yeah, I like that. And just to kind of answer, well, jump in off what Helena's saying, but then also answer your question, Alex. I think you're right. The AI is going to do things the way AI is going to learn, and it's taught and it's fed to how to do it, right? And eventually that's going to come, there's going to be a point where you can present it to people and it's going to be perfect. That was this show. However, what you're going to be missing out on, think about it as a DJ who's still playing vinyl. You're not going to hear the scratches of the needle hitting the record versus someone right now who's on CDJ 3000 and they're pressing play and cue. You know what I mean? There's a difference, and there's a market for each one of those things. Is AI going to allow the futuristic component and that stuff to kind of get pushed to the forefront? Yes. But just the same way as certain genres come up and down, we're seeing it with techno right now. Techno is on the main stage. It hasn't been there in years, not since I've been born, and I'm 31. So, but now we're seeing that that's coming back out, and I guarantee you something else will happen too. So it's the same thing. AI can only do so much. It does take, like you were saying, Helena, the human aspect and the collaborating of multiple brains to make something that feels natural and raw. And that's why I like the way it was combined here. He's not doing it to produce the whole album. It's not the whole component of the show. He brought in other artists to have their sound, and then he brought his own sound and then added the AI as a little enhancer on the top, which I thought was the perfect way to do it.
That's cool.
I also saw that he brought out Empire of the Sun, which I thought was crazy because the only place I've ever gotten to see them perform was actually at Glasse Festival in Denmark on the main stage. And that was like so random, but whoever's doing the talent buying for that festival, they really know how to like get legends over there somehow. And they were so good live. So when I saw that when they were one of the surprise guests, I was like, oh my God, that must have been such a treat. And then I saw so many people post about that moment. And it honestly just made me really happy because they have such a cool vibe as performers on their own. So I was like, oh my God. And their their music is also still very live, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that having that, it kind of reminds me, honestly, I'm referencing again John Summit's Kia show, because he had these orchestral components, but then also bring out all of these people. And I think it's kind of interesting how a lot of people that are doing some of like the biggest things in the music industry, they are kind of mirroring each other through the past 2 years. And I get it, but I think it's just like kind of interesting to see how they influence each other. And like, okay, is it going to become even more common for orchestral elements to be involved with dance music, which I think that nobody would predict.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It's a total celebration of music. He brought out special guests every night. And just to add one more note to the Empire of the Sun thing, icons, right? And this is again what make this such an iconic run. And Anima is now amongst the giants in the dance scene. Not only were they out there, they have a track together. It's not like a feature. No. It's a full-on collaboration between those two. That's insane. Being able to say that not only did you play the Sphere, but you have an ID that's coming out with Empire of the Sun. Are you serious? Like it doesn't get much more peak than that. So yeah. But again, I don't want to, like, it's been this whole time talking about Anima, so I'm gonna move on.
It's okay. It's a big thing to talk about. And to kind of go back to like AI and music, I definitely agree with you guys using it as a tool to enhance the collaborative or creative experience. Cause like there's so many tools where, for example, like when you're producing, there's a couple different variations of it, but you can literally like isolate the stems. So you can have like the vocals, you could have like the melody, like drums, like you can isolate those things and then just export them. If you're making like a remix or something, that really everybody's like told me that that'll really help speed up their process versus maybe like trying to recreate it or like whatever other methods people previously did to isolate those stems. It sounds really annoying in my perspective. So I think that there is a space for it in music, and that I feel like it might have an easier use in the industry if people would be more explorative with it versus just kind of shutting down. Because I think a lot of people right now are worried that it's going to like replace their opportunities, like what I was saying with the AI cello player with like an actual cello player. But I feel like that argument is kind of something that we see like every like 3 to 5 years about something new that comes along and everybody panics and is like, oh, but I think that you just kind of have to be like adaptive in the world that we live in. And I think that you can really make things easier for yourself with certain AI tools.
Yeah, I think the only problem that I really see with AI is the foundation of what it's built on, which is training it itself off of real people. And there's there's like that fair use argument. And that's where I have the issue with AI. And I think like that foundationally, personally, like that is an issue for me. But I do think that there is value in using it as a tool nonetheless, you know, because it does help make some aspects of your creativity a little bit easier. The annoying things of isolating audio or I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Photography wise, if you want something erased from your background, you could do that in 10 seconds versus an hour, you know? Makes it a little bit easier for you. Yes, you can do it on your own, but do you want to when you have a bunch of stuff that you need to cull through anyways and edit anyways? No, you do not. So I don't know. There's definitely a course of discussion right there about AI. I feel like we could spend hours talking about AI and whether or not it should be a thing, but I'll let you continue moving on.
It's a good discussion to have, and to kind of give another point to Helena there. All your thoughts were very well said, well resonated. But what I think you guys both hit on, and what I agree with, using it as a tool, I think is totally appropriate, totally okay. One thing that trips me up, and I'm getting better at hearing it now, but I'll give an example. I was just, digging for new songs, digging to a crate, and I stumbled on a track, and it was like, new track. I won't say the artist, but so-and-so and so-and-so. And it perfectly replicated this person's voice over this track. So, then it's like, okay, are you putting lyrics and or words into someone else's mouth who might not want to be represented in such a manner? Or at least give them a chance to get the paid opportunity before you do that. You know what I mean? So I can see, like I said, Helena's side of it where it can get messy that way. And I can see also, like, someone like me, it's like, yeah, I want this vocal, but I don't know how to do it. So I'm going to throw it here, add some reverb, and boom, we're good. I can use that in an edit now, you know?
Okay, but what I love that being used is like how Dylan Francis and a bunch of other DJs have been making like intros for their sets with
Mhm.
somebody else's voice that's like very, very famous but out of the scene. And they'll be like, I'm here to introduce Dylan Francis. And it was like Eminem's voice. And
Mhm.
it's like, he did not get Eminem, but you know what I mean? Like, that's fun. But if you're like writing lyrics for Travis Scott, and then, so actually, I think that a really cool use of this could maybe be for the demo process.
Mm.
So
That's a
if you
good point.
like, if you do songwrite a song and like think like, oh my God, you know who would be a really good feature on this? Travis Scott or Drake or whoever it is. And then you could go in and have the AI perform it for you as like a rough draft. And then if you send it, you could be like, here's an idea. And that's probably about as close as you're going to get without them actually coming in and like cutting the demo with you. So that could actually be helpful. But also, again, that might take some opportunities from vocalists. However, I know sometimes producers need other ways to make things happen to keep things
Mhm.
budget friendly, depending on where they're at. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I think that would be like a okay use of it. You know, I wouldn't have a problem if somebody sent me something like that as long as they didn't publish it.
Right. Right. All good points.
That being said, I have a quote that's been floating around socials for the past year that I thought would be a good one to wrap up the AI section with. And it's by Joanna Macy Juska. And she says, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes.
Yeah.
I think she summed it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next section for us to talk about is something else that happened over New Year's Eve that was really big was that Skrillex cut his hair and the internet lost their minds. So this prompted Helena to send me a a Reddit thread that said, what makes Skrillex so special? And I thought we could kind of just touch on that because he does have his upcoming album as the last one under his deal with Atlantic. And after that, he's going to be going completely independent, which I think is going to be a really big moment for him. But to you guys, what makes Skrillex so special?
As I mentioned before, I grew up on the indie metalcore scene. I was not a dance kid my whole life. And yeah, he was making his rounds with that group. I only caught them after they had a replacement vocalist, but everyone knew Sonny Moore. Like if you were in the scene, you knew who he was, you knew the haircut, you knew the stage presence. So that was my first instance. But then when I did started getting into dance music, like full on actually diving into the world of it, probably 2009 to 2010ish, that's when Skrillex was releasing these new, these dubstep is what they all referred to back then tracks. And it was so cool. And then to me, metalcore is built on the foundation of a lot of steel and metallic noises, right? I was hearing a lot of those same things, but it's electronic stuff. And another big point of metalcore is the breakdown. Well, every dubstep drop that you hear is just a breakdown if we're learning music foundation. So being able to have this new area and people think this is cool, because the other thing was I'd be wearing my band tees or I'd let people hear it and they're like, oh, what is that? That's too loud in my ears. Well, now it's dance music and it's cool. So that was my first instance. And then I remember I went to Skrillex, Zed, and Porter Robinson at the pageant in St. Louis, Missouri. I think it was 2012, maybe. First
I
show
have
like
to tell you
that.
a follow-up story about that
Please
tour.
do.
Keep going.
One of the first shows like that I've been to. I was there for Zed, I'll be honest, because I love Zed, but Skrillex, absolutely, gosh, the things he was doing was iconic. And then ever since that show, I've followed him since. In terms of what makes him special, I have a business degree and I have an emphasis in marketing. He's just a master of telling a story and connecting with people. Everything he does, you think about it like how people think about politics or sports teams. The reason they get so attached is because the emotional value people put into those, right? Artists are learning now, especially through pioneers such as Skrillex. It's not just about the music. It's not just about that. That's what we care about in the door most first, right? But you have to build a relationship with the people who are funding these things for you. And he's done that. I remember when we saw him at Lala, I think it was 2 years ago now, technically. This man announced a show, or no, it would have been last year. This man announced that he was going to open up his stage as well as close it. And he was out there taking pictures with the people before that. He's done that since I've seen him in the scene back in the day. So to see that he's still carrying that same character now, I think that's what makes him so special. He's so passionate about it. He understands not just from the marketing side of it, but from the true goodness in a heart that it's like, I can't do this unless I have everyone else here with me. And that spans to the DJs as well. There were artists that played Lala that day who I'd never heard of, but he brought out because he built the stage that day. So I think that's what makes Skrillex so special, if you ask me.
I like that answer.
It's a good answer. I have a similar story to Josh. However, I didn't really get into metalcore until a lot later on. I'm not going to go into that whole scene, but I did know a little bit more about From First to Last from what I've been hearing, what I've been listening. I believe that they also performed at Warped Tour in 2008. Did they do other ones, Josh? Do you know? Yeah, they were regulars, right?
They had a reunion tour as well, but
yeah.
Sony wasn't present for those. Yeah.
Yeah, so I recognized like they're probably one of their bigger songs. They're still pretty small in consideration to the metalcore scene, but I was listening to some of their music just to kind of familiarize myself with them again, and I recognized a lot of those breakdowns, a lot of those hooks, and then the melody. And that's just something that really stuck out to me about his work as From First to Last, as the vocalist. And I feel like going into that dubstep scene and basically creating the foundation of what dubstep is, that's kind of where I was going more into that. He was doing something new, he was doing something different, and he really succeeded at that. And I think he consistently does that in a way and makes it feel effortless at the same time, even though he's using pretty interesting instruments and sounds to bring everything together and bring his concept together. It just really the response is very authentic and very passionate, and yeah, it's pretty much it. Yeah,
I was really curious to hear from you, since you definitely have like a very big focus on the metal industry, and so I was like really curious if you got to see him at all, which I know it's a really long time ago, so if you don't remember, I
didn't start going into shows until I was an adult, so I didn't see any shows. I didn't do Warped Tour. By the time I was an adult and Warped Tour was still a thing, they weren't performing in my state.
Oh,
so I never got to go to Warped Tour.
I never got to go to Warped Tour as a kid because I would always like be with my family abroad during that time. However, I did get to have a comeback episode because in college they had one of the tours come through Nashville, and I think it was kind of one of the last ones, but they had a lot of volunteer opportunities. And I originally volunteered for production to try to like learn about like event production, but it was way too hot for me and I was starting to fade really hard. So they stuck me in artist catering. So I was literally just like yapping and serving people food. Nice. And I was in air conditioning and I had like one of those hairnets on, but I was literally just like serving food and talking to them. But I had a great time. And I was so happy that I got to have my like Warped Tour moment, because I didn't have to work that long either. It was a great opportunity, honestly. Like I got to see like some of the production stuff. Then when the heat started to get me, they stuck me somewhere where I would be more comfortable, but still work, which I was like fine with. And then when I was off, I still got to like run around and see some like throwback bands, which was like a really good time. For me though, with Skrillex specifically, I was exposed to him for the first time when I was in 6th grade in 2009 or 2008. And I actually want to fact check myself really quickly and see Cinema.
Yeah, no problem.
When did that come out? When did the Cinema release date? Oh my God. Okay, wait. It says it came out in 2011.
Okay, Cinema's 2011. Yep.
But I definitely heard something before that because I remember being at a school before transferring to another one. Do you know what I mean? Release dates. What was the first Skrillex song? Okay, hang on.
Well, the first hit was Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites.
Yeah.
Then when did that come out though?
That would have been in between, 09 and 10.
Yeah, but weren't they teasing it before it was out?
I was gonna
'Cause
say
I
you
think
probably
I heard
the
it
demo.
too.
I maybe I heard like a bootleg of version of it online or something on
Yeah,
like a
Was it on
SoundCloud or
SoundCloud?
Mixcloud.
Yeah.
it
I
totally
don't
could have been.
I don't remember which platform it was, but I remember being sent it because I remember immediately after I was like, what is this music? And then I went up and the only other person I could find like easily being in 6th grade and like hee hee on YouTube, I
Yeah.
found Bass Nectar. It
Say-
was and I yep. And I found Bass Head and I was like, oh, this music's really
Yeah.
cool. And then
Yeah.
now I'm like, God.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
That was me, and I got into like a little Seven Lions train, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yay,
Fair
7
enough.
Lions. We love
Yeah.
him.
What's wrong with 7 Lions?
We
Yeah.
don't clap with that Bass Nectar.
Not for yet.
But that's we're not going to talk about that much. But luckily, my fandom didn't really go deeper than that. I was like, oh, cool song, and I kept like exploring it. You know what I mean? But hearing Cinema and Scary Monsters, that project, like very early on, I was like, what is this? And I just thought it was so different from what I'd hear, you know? And so like dubstep has never necessarily been something that's like been really, really close to my heart. Like I've had fun with it and like I can go vibe with it once in a while, but it's not something where I'm like over, like, you know what I mean? Like it's just not like my genre. That being said, Skrillex has always been somebody that I'm like, I just don't want to hear any disrespect about him. I'm just not having it. You know what I mean? Like, if you have disrespect to say on Skrillex, not in front of me. I'm not listening to you. I do not care to hear it.
Yeah.
I think he is just like he's so dialed in on what he's doing always and very in tune. And that's honestly something that sometimes I feel kind of jealous of, even though like I feel pretty in tune with myself. But with him, it's like he just feels like he's so locked in. He knows what he's doing. Like he knows how to communicate with the crowd, like you said, which is so interesting that you pointed out because he feels kind of distant. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's just because he's ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I think he's still ahead of his time even now.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
that
would
kind of
agree
creates a
with that.
distance.
But also too, just with like the repertoire that they have for it being like a very close knit circle. You know what I mean? One of the comments too on the Reddit post where what that I really liked and wanted to read was by the Almighty Walrus. And he said he's really, really good at the call and response. His songs sound like a conversation. Most of the first songs and chants humans made were the same. One person sings something, another person replies. Something about that just tickles the human brains. And when they said that, a lot made sense for me because that is true with his music. And I think that's something a lot of people miss. Like, I think that you even hear that in Sip and Yak by Clooney, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Because
To your point about the distance, and that's what's cool about it though. I remember I'm a back left, back right kind of guy if it's a massive festival, right? So I can have some room to dance and do my thing. But I remember being there and looking up and seeing, the logo. That's the first thing you see. And it's like, oh, it's time. And then you see this, tiny, larger than life figure because you're so far away. And then you get in the moment, it's like, gosh, this guy's been doing this since literally 2008 and he's still crushing it. I think that's what makes it feel distant. So, and to like back up Helena, he's that far ahead of his time. And like someone who now where I'm getting into Ableton and producing on my own and DJing, it's like that guy is 2,000 laps ahead of me. You know what I mean? And not to compare it in that way, but if we're just going to think about it, this guy is a total innovator. Even the stuff he's doing now, he's still doing some of the original stuff he's doing, but he's working it in a way that fits the modern sound. And then you'll see clips of him playing his other shows or the ones where he's dropping a whole set of unreleased music. These are sounds where people are like, why is his production so good? It's because he stayed true to himself and his own sound. And that's how he comes up with new stuff every time. So, Skrillex is the man. Like you said, no disrespect about Skrillex ever.
just not having it.
No.
That being said, too, wait, Helena, do you have something to say?
I was just going to say, like, similar. I feel that similar, even though I'm not super duper familiar with Skrillex, and I'm not even super familiar with his original project from first to last, like, I feel he always is towing the line between finding out what's effortless and what makes a good song, too. And that's just really cool about that. And some people might hate that because he's created it and found a formula that, you know, that, hang on. He's created a formula for music. Some people say his stuff sounds like it's all the same, but he created that sound. He unlocked it, basically. So that I don't think that he deserves
And
any hate
to add
for
on
that.
to what you're saying, what I think some fans struggle with early on, someone like me especially, even because I would say I was probably had my little, it's called bass music now just to make it easy. I was probably a bass head for like 4 years or so all throughout, you know, late high school into that. He had that sound, and then he leaves, and then he comes back and he's doing electro house, and then he leaves and he's come back and he's doing UK, and then he leaves and he come back and now he's doing tech house with little bass elements. So again, it's one of those things where his sound is always there. You're going to get to hear a little bit and piece of that, but it's different every time, which is just the coolest thing, because when I sign up to, even taking it back to Animal for a second, there's certain songs I want to hear. I paid $250, man. I want to hear those hits, you know, and he was doing it the first time. I remember the next time I saw him after that, he probably only had 2 of the same tracks. You know what I mean? And granted, that was 4 years later. So yeah, tons of new music out since then, but still jumping from dubstep to reggaeton to all these different genres and making it work for himself, still being a main stage headlining act, is just a rarity. And not everyone can understand that, I guess.
I totally agree with that. I do want to circle back to my story, which I realized was probably around the same time that you saw Skrillex during that Zed's Dead and
Porter Robinson.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. That was a great time to be alive. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I saw that Skrillex was coming to Nashville after I had moved here. And so a little like tidbit about me is that I was actually emancipated from my parents. Their schedules just did not align to be in the same place for me to keep my Danish passport for my citizenship. So I was like, I asked Denmark, like, if I get emancipated, will you guys consider me an adult so I can do this? And they're like, you're going to divorce your family to keep your citizenship. And I was like, yes. And they're like, yeah, that's fine with us. So then I did that. So I was legally an adult before I was 18, right? So I see that Skrillex is doing an 18 plus tour. I bought a ticket and I showed up at the door with my ID and emancipation papers. And I show my ID and they say, ma'am, you're too young. And I said, but legally I'm an adult. And the guard was just like, are you here with anybody? And I was like, no. And he was like, does your family know you're here? And I was like, yes. And they're like, and they still let you come. And I said, they knew they wouldn't stop me and from trying. And the guy was like, I don't know what to do with this girl. So they brought like 4 different people over to talk to me and be like, this is just not how it works. And I was just like, man, you got to let me in though. I bought the ticket. And they would be like, but you're not 18. And I would be like, but the purpose of that is for adults. I am an adult. And so I literally went back and forth with them for like 30 minutes before giving up. It was just like, oh, it's not happening. And I eventually ended up not getting in, which was devastating. But I still think that story is pretty funny of like me being a teenager being like, I am legally an adult. Let me in.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's incredible. I wish you would have got in though. That would have been icing on the cake.
Would have been the best story.
I get it. Like I do, but they should have let me in.